we're heading to a vineyard and farm at Taitapu on the fringes of Christchurch to find out about an earth-moving project in flood-prone Early Valley. The paddocks leading down to the valley floor are being transformed into a series of low dams and basins. They'll capture stormwater that runs down a steep gully and off the surrounding hills during heavy rain. Brent Rawstron from Rossendale Wines has teamed up with the Christchurch City Council to prevent the land from flooding. He's also developing some of the land into residential sections. Cosmo Kentish-Barnes is with Brent on a hillside overlooking the project.
We moved into the valley in 1952 when I was 6 months old, and we farmed on the flat, and because the farm would continuously flood, even though he put in drains and a pump to pump the water, at the end of the day he gave up and said, well, I'm going to buy the farm next door, which never floods and is a bit more hilly country.
Was this land used for what, sheep and beef?
Originally it was cropping, and then we planted a small vineyard up here on the slopes, and then the rest of it was for sheep and beef, mainly beef.
Now we can see some machinery in the distance working on the land. What are you doing here?
We're just putting the final touches to stormwater holding capacity. It's a detention ponds to hold stormwater during a rain event, and the total storage of these 4 ponds in total flood in a big rain event can store up to 128,000 cubic metres of water.
What happened to all the earth that you had to dig up to make these ponds or shallow basins?
Basically used in the walls, because there's only in certain areas have we taken down the ground. The ground level in the bottom basin down by the woolshed is basically the ground level that it was before. So by just taking off the higher spots and putting them back up onto the sides, we've created the dam walls.
How often does this valley flood?
It will flood to a certain extent every year. It will flood virtually the whole of the valley floor about every second year, round about sort of quarter to half a metre deep, and about every 5 to 10 years it'll flood to an extent that it actually covers up all the fences. So at that stage it'll then flow across the old Taitapu Road at the open end of the valley.
So these basins will effectively prevent that flooding from happening?
We won't prevent it entirely, because there are other valleys that feed into the valley floor at Early Valley and Lansdowne Valley, but we'll cut it down an awful lot.
From where we are standing, it looks like you are building a sort of upper basin, a middle basin and a lower basin. When it's raining heavily, will these all be full of water?
They will fill at different rates. The first one will fill because the outlet's going to be very small, only 100 mils of outlet, so it'll fill up remarkably quickly. It'll then go through an 825 pipe, and then that'll fill up quickly, and then they'll start to go over the spillway into the middle basin. And in the middle basin, the outlet for that starts off with a small pipe at the bottom, then a slightly bigger pipe. That will fill up rapidly quickly, then it'll spill over the next spillway into the lower basin and so on. That sort of trickles itself down. In a big rain, we'll see all of them full.
You must get heaps of water coming down this rather deep gully.
Oh yes, it comes down at a great rate, and going up in the hills behind us, there's a valley that goes all the way to the Summit Road at the top of the Port Hills, and all that water comes down through this farm, and the intention was to be able to hold that water back for 5 to 6 days and stop it going over the flat land to the south of us, but also to slow water getting into the Horswell River, which is the main river that goes from around the southern side of the Port Hills to Lake Ellesmere. So we hold back that 120,000 odd cubic metres. That will stop or help to lower the flooding from here basically to Lake Ellesmere.
Now, you've been working on this project for years, and you've been doing it in conjunction with the Christchurch City Council. How has that worked?
It's almost the perfect PPP, public-private partnership in many ways, because this block of land was 28 hectares. It was zoned for 4-hectare block development. And so we set a value that the 7 4-hectare lots were going to be worth X. And so we did a deal with the council. We said, well, okay, if we use 1 hectare of that and choose the right blocks and keep nice building platforms, people can build nice houses with some elevation and overlooking the ponds. And the balance of those 3 hectares basically were of no extra value. As long as people got a nice 1 hectare building site, they'll pay the same amount whether getting the 4 hectares and the use of the 4 hectares or not. I had the huge advantage because we were able to therefore cluster the 4 of the 4 hectare lots in a small cluster. My cost of servicing them just fell through the floor. And so therefore I was gaining in terms of less infrastructure costs. I was still getting my 7 lots to sell, but 3 hectares of their land has gone under the pond.
So effectively you've gifted the majority of this land, 12 hectares of land, to the Christchurch City Council.
Yeah, it's our legacy going forward to have created this.
That land will never be able to be developed into housing.
Nope, it's gone. It's taken out of the housing estate completely, because that is doing the necessary stormwater retention for other developments that are going on around us. And the land to the north of us is zoned for residential, and there's enough land up there for 150 or more houses to be built in time. And all of that land, the runoff from those houses, will eventually be coming down to the valley floor.
So in exchange for getting the land, the council are paying for these basins to be put in. How much is it costing?
It's going to end up costing somewhere around about $40 a cubic metre to build these dams. A reasonable amount of money to pay, but 2 years ago they, in the Christchurch Press, they were promoting a project they're doing around at the Adventure Park, where they're putting the same sort of structure in the bottom of that valley to store. We're storing 128,000 cubes. We're building a structure to do 213,000 cubes. The estimated budget for their facility was just under $150 a cubic metre, and they even admitted in the article that inflation will make it more expensive than that. So by doing a public-private partnership where we won, they won, everyone won, they're getting these stormwater ponds built at about a quarter of the cost that they're building them just around the corner.
So are you managing the whole project?
Yes. I was silly enough to dream about this project when I was 54 in 2006 as a result of the subdivision going on above us. And it's sort of, for lots of, I looked down on that flooded valley all my life. And I thought, we can actually do something about this. We have the ability to do something about this. And if I do it now and I can promote it now before I get too old and we're just selling the farm off as 4 hectare lots, we can do it now, because if you sold it at 4 hectare lots, it would be houses in the wrong spot to make this happen. You could never retrofit it. We had to do it whilst I owned it, or you would never do it at all.
Our listeners can probably hear a post driver. What's happening closer to us?
We're just fencing off the sides of the access roads to these blocks that will go on the market September, October this year.
And great conditions for that post driver, because it's still quite dry.
It's
not too muddy.
It's not too hot for them either, which is even better.
You've also been doing quite a bit of native planting down here. Tell me about that.
Yes, well, the project really got started in 2017. We started to put rock rivers down the bottom of the valleys that will feed water into the project. So we went through and we planted a large corridor for birds to be able to migrate up into the Port Hills and then down back into the Horseville Quarry, etc.
Well, it's going to be interesting to come back here
after a decent rain.
Yeah, after a decent rain, to see how this all works, if that's okay.
For sure, absolutely.
Now, Brent, we have come back down the valley to your vineyard, and we can see the grapes all the way down the row here, which is, what, 200 metres?
Yeah, 250 metres long.
You've got netting over the vines still. Is that because you have a bird problem here?
Yeah, we're surrounded by bird motels. Part of the problem of planting a lot of trees over the years that Shirley and I have been here is also encourages the birds, and there's no way that we want to get rid of our trees, and the birds come with it, so they come with the territory. So the easiest thing is to net everything. If we don't net everything, it'll be gone, and gone by the morning sort of style.
It looks like you are not far off from harvesting.
The Gewürztraminer will harvest next week. It's about a week away. It's coming up nicely. The flavours are quite good. We just need just a little bit more sugar. The Pinot Noir for rosé production probably next week if we get time, otherwise straight after Easter. Pinot Noir for table production definitely after Easter. And we planted about 5 hectares of Sauvignon Blanc here November 22, and we'll harvest that for the first time this year. So that'll be interesting to see how Sauvignon Blanc goes 300 kilometres further south than our vineyards in Marlborough.
Before you put these vineyards in, you were mainly farming cattle here.
We go back to prior to 1984, and we were big cropping farmers, a lot of processed foods for J. Waite canneries at the time, now Heinz. So we'd be growing peas and beans and broccoli and interspersing that with wheat and barley and grass seeds and virtually everything else. So we were big cropping farmers. We enjoyed cropping. 1984 came along, subsidies disappeared overnight. We had to look to do something different. We decided that we would never ever produce a commodity again. We're only interested in producing product that could be marketed under our own brand, and that started with our beef cattle to beef products to Del Meyer's in Germany. We would send in the top 3 primal cuts, vacuum packed, chilled, air freighted in every month, and did that for 27 years. And that led to the idea of Burgundy and beef. And so we looked to plant and did plant Pinot Noir, which led to the fact of how we're going to dispose of the early vintages. So we opened a little restaurant in an old building on our site, and that became very successful. And so it just all grew. But it grew out of a dissatisfaction of ever going back to commodity production. We're just not interested. And it actually is relatively easy to develop a foreground story around what you're doing and run a branded product.
So what happens to the grapes that you grow here?
We don't make any wine on the site at all now. We make the grapes that are grown here, which will be harvested soon, go to Sherwood's in Waipara, and they'll make this for us because Dane Sherwood went through the same viticulture courses as Shirley and I at Lincoln, so we're long-term friends.
And over time you've put in some vineyards in Marlborough?
Oh no, the vineyards we bought, we all planted. It was far easier to finance a vineyard that was in full production because then you sort of harvested before you had to start paying the interest bills and the management bills, and so you had that fruit that you could then put into the system that was able to pay the bills for the next year. The vineyards that were planted are the ones down here in Canterbury.
Once the wine is made, do you sell it locally? Where does it go?
No, 99%, fraction under 99% of our wine is exported, mainly to the United States, majority to the United States, and a little bit into Canada.
And how much wine are we talking about?
60,000 cases.
That's a lot of wine.
Yeah, we fly very much under the radar, but that's our total production plus a little bit more. Obviously, predominantly Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc, which is what the world wants. And the company we deal with in the United States do the distribution and the retail. They've got retail, they've got 250 stores in 28 states.
What's that company called?
Total Wine and More Limited. And the stores are the size of a reasonable sized supermarket in New Zealand, and there is more than 8,000 different wine labels in every store. There's around about 4,500 to 5,000 different beers in every store, and there's around about 3,500 to 4,000 different spirits in every store, including 605 different vodkas. So it's a alcohol superstore.
How do you ensure that your brand gets noticed by their customers?
Well, we spend a lot of time doing wine tastings in the stores, and they have a phenomenal program behind their staff. And any customer looking lost, they'll approach and say, "Can we help you?" And they'll actually then start recommending the wines that will go with a certain food and certain.
What a great service!
And it's that amazing service. And they're running tastings Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays, every week, every store.
Do you make wine specifically for that market?
Well, we certainly have adjusted our wine production with that knowledge in hand. When we pick, how we pick, what the flavour profile is when we pick, right through to making it. But it's made as a designer product. It's a moderate price wine. It sort of retails in their stores at sort of $12.99, $13.99 US, which is, slightly below the average price. So it's affordable quality what we're going for, but we certainly have gone to the effort of trying to make a product that matches what the customer's wanting.
Brent Rawstron there from Rossendale Wines in Taitapu near Christchurch. He was talking to Cosmo Kentish Barnes.